Hello everyone, and welcome to Stellaris Nomads, the new DLC that allows you to bin off the whole building an empire and instead roam the galaxy as a nomadic warlord, where today we're going to become the greatest pirate the galaxy has ever seen. By subjugating our neighbors, stealing entire economies, and becoming the Great Khan, we can use our new power to become filthy rich, sacrifice millions to an interdimensional horror, all while breaking the game. Before we go any further, this video is sponsored by the kind folks over at Paradox, and Nomads is available to pick up today if I haven't messed up this release. The first thing we had to do was make our empire, and out of all of these amazing choices, we're going to pick the appropriately named Give Me Your Wallet. Its capital being Please Don't Make This Harder Than It Has to Be, and the star system, I Have a Family to Feed. All you really need to know is that we're a nomadic band of fanatic militarists who hate everyone, and that we like stealing stuff. Oh, and for the fun of it, we have an aristocratic class to pander to. Loading into the game, we don't start with any planets, but instead we have an arc ship. More specifically, we had a military arc ship. And taking a closer look at it, it's basically our colony, shipyard, military, and science ship. Throughout the game, we'll be able to specialize it by adding things like a devastator cannon. But for now, it's just pretty basic. Unpausing the game, we were met with a wall of text explaining that we had finished installing a hyperdrive, but we still have a handful of faults throughout the ship. To remove them, we had to complete some missions which steered us towards exploring the galaxy. I have to admit, some of these debuffs really sucked, so we should probably get them done as quickly as possible. So, having a little look around then, I noticed that the only faction we were aware of was a band of marauders. This is because I picked the Heirs of the Khan origin, one of the new ones that involve us becoming the Great Khan and conquering the galaxy. Starting with completing this mission, or contract, to disrupt some usurper activity, which we did by, consuming them. For those wondering, the story behind this origin is that we were the heir to the Khanate. However, we were betrayed. Now on the run, we have to gather our strength to reclaim the throne, while actively dodging hit squads. While on the topic of new stuff, our logistics ships were able to build way stations, but we'll talk about them a little later, and they were also able to harvest systems for their resources, which for now wasn't too impressive, but later on it got a little ridiculous. Anyway, it didn't take us long till we found our first alien civilization, but since we haven't deciphered their language, they'll be referred to as the Iota Menace. This didn't stop us from being able to explore inside them, where I made the decision to take supremacy as our first tradition. This will give our military a whole load of buffs, which will be very handy because the first thing we're going to do is form a relationship with these Xeno scum. The type of relationship where I'm going to be receiving. Their resources, that is. Obviously, we had an advantage in the early game since we had a massive military arc with nearly 1,000 fleet power, so we should probably start invading people. Naturally then, I began spamming corvettes while my envoys worked tirelessly to crack the language. A process that involved kidnapping some of them, cutting one open, and then waving the organs in front of the others until they translated for us. It should be to no one's surprise then that after the procedure, they started shooting us on sight. Seeing this as an opportunity, I destroyed their fleet and blew up their shipyard before officially discovering them. Well, they didn't exactly have anything pleasant to say to us. We will not rest until we have avenged the torrents who found their deaths on your operating tables? Yeah, alright buddy. You and what fleet? With the pleasantries out the way, I declared war on them with the goal of turning them into a tributary. This will force them to pay 30% of their basic resources to us, and over time we'll be able to renegotiate this contract and steal up to 75% of them. So I got to work bombing their capital, where we had the option to use indiscriminate bombardment, which targets both military and civilian targets. Once a majority of their defending armies had been wiped out, we landed our own armies and took the planet, forcing the Torrent Republic to bend the knee. I actually hadn't looked at their ethics before declaring war on them, and it turns out they're fanatic militarists who love the environment and just wanted to build stuff. Well, good news for them, I found them a new job which involves building me an economy. Safe to say they weren't too happy about this, so it probably wouldn't be a terrible idea to try and restore relations. And oh boy, did we have a lot of work to do, as we were sitting on a comfortable minus 1,304. Good luck, single envoy. I have faith in you. To maximize our profits, we're also going to build a way station in their system. Way stations are kind of like outposts, except they don't claim the system. They're also how we harvest resources, which then a logistics ship or our ark will have to pick up. Since we're running the Void Reaver Civic, we're able to build pirate hideouts, which will steal 1.5% of their monthly production. I'll be completely honest, right now, this kinda sucked, as we were stealing a whole 0.08 alloys and like 0.15 food. A little later on, I would build a Reaver Stronghold, which, if I'm reading this right, increases our pirate hideouts production by an additional 1.5%. Finally, we can also build a Tribute Vault, which, at the cost of a little bit of loyalty, will steal even more resources. In the meantime, I spammed some foundries on our ark to give us some more precious alloy production. I also completed the missions to remove these horrible debuffs, and had my logistics ships harvest systems for their resources, a few of which may have accidentally been the torrent systems, souring our relations even more. Oh, and the Marauders sent some bounty hunters after us. Allegedly. Anyway, while I was doing all this, I was also preparing for our next war south against a faction of explorers, who wanted to do nothing more than better themselves with technology, and after a little convincing, donate their resources to me. Now with 2 factions under our belt, this pushed our operational reserves to high, allowing me to switch from balance to burning resources, which gave us a handful of buffs. Operational reserves, by the way, is just our energy and minerals combined, and as long as they remain positive, we're good, because you really don't want them to drop to low. So to make sure that didn't happen, I of course began pirating my new subject. Now pirating 2 subjects, yeah, we still weren't making a lot of resources. A majority of our resources were coming from them being tribute states rather than the actual piracy. Also, enough time had passed, allowing me to negotiate the terms of our contract with our best friends over at the Torrent Republic, meaning I could now turn them into a satrophy, a unique subject type to our origin that makes them transfer 30% of their naval cap to us. Being a satrophy also allows me to build holdings on them, allowing me to build our unique noble building on their planet, which will give me 2 stability on my capital, at the expense of giving my subject's planet minus 1500 amenities and minus 1 loyalty. But that sounds like a them problem. I mean, they literally hate me anyway, so what difference is it gonna make? On the topic of hate, the next faction we discovered were Fanatic Purifiers, a faction that views all alien life as a cosmic mistake, which is not exactly ideal because, as you can imagine, they're not the friendliest people, nor will they take too kindly to being extorted. Anyway, discovering them, I did sniff out an opportunity, as they were currently at war with an unknown faction, and all we had to do was find said person, and we should be able to offer them our protection. You know, I wasn't planning on being a good guy this run, but I will stand up for the weak, as long as they pay me. And also don't mind me pirating them on the side. While my envoys were doing their thing, we finished Supremacy, allowing us to take our first Ascension perk, which are powerful buffs that push our faction in certain directions. Since we're playing the subject game, I picked Shared Destiny, which will increase the naval capacity contribution from our subjects, and give us some more envoys to play with. Fast forwarding a little bit, we sure did find a horde of people, including the poor bastard who was currently being purged. We also had an election which reminded me of the name of our glorious leader. I mean, yeah, I forgot I called my person Glizzy Lizzy. And you don't need to worry, because of course she won the election. Getting back on topic, it was time for a little bit of rat gaming in the form of invading this theocracy that was still at war with the Purifiers, which was such a shame for them as it meant all their navies were busy. Actually, judging by the size of the Purifier fleets, they were probably dead. So it didn't take long for them to bend the knee. The only problem we had now was, it was now my responsibility to deal with the Purifiers. But we'll worry about that later. As for now, I had more pressing matters. A little while back, I had sent an envoy to improve relations with the Torrent Republic. Well, he hadn't done a very good job as they still hated me. Due to our lack of intelligence, we couldn't exactly see why they hated us, so I sent in a spy whose job was to attain us some assets. However, when it came to launching the operation, I could use the internal organs I had acquired earlier to assist us. Yeah, it's safe to say this reminded me exactly why they hated us. Also, the whole piracy thing didn't help either. Moving swiftly on, a renowned paragon arrived, and it was exactly the man I was looking for, as his only sentence during the interview was, "Your industrial plants are a disgrace." He was perfect because I was essentially turning my capital into a massive alloy factory, where I'd specialized our ordnance engineering bay into void forges, which increases our output even more. Plus, they also gave our arcs some armor hit points and hardening, which is cool. Speaking of war, it was probably a good time to eradicate the purifiers before they get any stronger, which meant, sorry game, we don't have time to find cute things, we have hateful aliens to kill. Declaring war, we flew into their capital, which kicked off a massive battle where we fucking smashed them. With their navies dead, we got to work bombing their capital with our unique plundering bombardment stance, which for the price of 3,000 dead aliens, we got 13 unity, free trade, and 4 alloys. Very nice. After deploying the peacekeepers and conquering the planet, we shout out a not-so-racist empire thanks to our total war policy. Don't get me wrong, they were still hateful little beings, but at least they're not actively committing genocide. During the war though, I'm proud to announce that we made a friend. Out of the blue, these absolute chads appeared, and the first thing they did was declare war. Don't get me wrong, they didn't exactly have the biggest navy, but their help was appreciated. Taking a closer look at them, it turns out they had 5 Gaia worlds in their home system, which, yeah, that's pretty insane. I actually ended up throwing them a non-aggression pact and guaranteeing their independence, followed up by setting up a commercial and research agreement with them. A little later on, I would end up subjugating them through diplomacy, and using them as kind of a base of operation, because unsurprisingly, with 5 Gaia worlds, they kind of became the backbone of my economy. Also, I'd like to point out, throughout this entire game, our resources fluctuated like crazy. One moment we'd be making 1,000 consumer goods, and then all of a sudden we'd have a shortage, which I can only assume was because our subjects were constantly going bankrupt. After the game, I did switch to one of them to see what their economy looked like, and oh boy, it wasn't great. Anyway, while I was doing the galaxy a favor in the form of killing some genocidal maniacs, a federation in the east saw this as a prime opportunity to declare war on me. Those bastards! I'm trying to help the galaxy and these guys are declaring war on me? Don't mind like the 4 empires I've eaten, but I mean, started protecting. However, in this moment of darkness, I discovered a new friend in the form of a hive mind, who actually asked to join the war. Their help was most welcome because for the first time, we were significantly outgunned. Since they had a big old Federation fleet alongside their own ones, I had to pull back and spam out another horde of corvettes, while they gaslighted me with job offers to bomb my own vassal. Yeah, I would be lying if I told you I wasn't considering it, as they were offering me something like 12,500 trade. Anyway, fast forwarding a little bit, I did manage to catch their Federation fleet without any support and absolutely annihilated it. With the bulk of their navy dead and my hive mind friend doing a majority of the conquering, all I had to do was invade a couple more planets and then they finally surrendered, giving us another tributary. Of course, to punish the rest of them, I built pirate hideouts in all their capitals. With all our pirate outposts combined, we were now stealing over 100 consumer goods a month, plus like 20 alloys. Which combined with the 6 subjects I was rinsing, plus the tribute vaults I was slowly stacking more and more buffs on, it's safe to say the economy was booming. Something that made me feel very comfortable because we discovered another fanatic purifier. Thankfully, these guys were on the other side of the galaxy, so it's their problem. Anyway, it was around this time that I had figured out that I was playing on the wrong build. Paradox had mentioned to me that one of the early builds I had access to, this origin wasn't working correctly. And me being a moron, selected the build which of course, this origin wasn't working correctly. So after a quick update, I'm pleased to announce it's now working. This meant the bounty hunters were actually being sent to kill us. However, let's just say things hadn't quite balanced out. It was at this point I have some sad news for you guys. Glizzy Lizzie unfortunately lost the election to this guy, and then she unfortunately passed away. Anyway, I had completely forgotten I had recruited this guy, and him winning the election was not exactly ideal as this really annoyed our xenophobic faction. I had hired him earlier because I just finished researching and then building my second arc. With barely anyone living on it, I wanted to use his unique perk that abducts pops after invading a planet. I just needed to get him out of government, so after a snap election where we rigged him to lose, we made him a general and invaded this poor bastard in the north. We then invaded his one and only planet, stealing a chunk of his pop. Just as I was wrapping up this war, we got an event that informed us that we had some visitors who go by the Chosen, who were a group of fanatic xenophobes who wanted to purge the galaxy. Oh, for fuck's sake. What is that, the third fanatic purifier in this galaxy? I really am running a protection racket over here. Anyway, the Chosen resided in this little section just outside of the galaxy, with the only entrance being a wormhole, which annoyingly has a lock on it. Something I found pretty funny was the first person they declared war on was the other fanatic purifier. So we just left them to figure out who's the most xenophobic, because we had more important things to do, like becoming the Great Khan. While I was preparing for another war, I got an event telling me that our old clan was gathering to appoint a new Great Khan, and we had 10 years to return and take back the throne. Mustering all my fleets, I might have brought a little too much firepower, as our rival only had 9k. Nevertheless, with the claimant dead, the throne was now ours, and we had a choice. Either sound the drums of war, making us the Great Khan, end the era of Khans and transform all my subjects into regular vassals, or vengeance has been served and leave the marauders to do their own thing. Yeah, obviously, I wanted to become the Great Khan, so we sounded the drums of war and became the mid-game crisis. Alongside the Chosen. And holy shit, not only did it give us all of their ships, completely crashing our economy, we were now by far the strongest faction in the galaxy. And it should be to no one's surprise that the galactic community did not appreciate this, and declared me a crisis, kicking off a war that would essentially last for the rest of the game. I have to admit, I was not worried about this war at all, until one of their navies snuck in and stole my capital. Yep, they literally stole my capital, and fucked off. Eventually, I did manage to catch up with it, and this kicked off a very unusual chain of events. After defeating my capital in battle, it procced an event called Vindication, allowing me to sound the drums of war again, and make me the Great Khan again. But for some reason, the game didn't actually let me recapture my capital, and after we attacked it again, the event popped up again. And this gave me an extremely good idea. Every time this event popped, it spawned a massive stack of ships and gave us the Great Khan Vision Civic again, giving us 20 damage reduction, 50% damage versus star bases, and commander capacity plus 10. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this, but for those that don't, I repeated the cycle until my economy literally exploded. After a little bit of reorganization and eventually getting my capital back, we now confusingly had 2 Great Khans, and our way stations had essentially become indestructible. We could now bin off this war with the galactic community because I had a much bigger target in mind, aka a fallen empire. Fallen empires are extremely powerful factions that are so advanced they literally don't care about the rest of the galaxy. Since they're so advanced, their planets make a shitload of resources and would make the perfect target for a little piracy. Flying into their territory then, I parked up next to their fleet and declared war. I have to admit, I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to win, even though I had brought one of my arcs, which was now equipped with something called a Devastator cannon. But my fears were quickly washed away when we absolutely wrecked them. Killing their fleet allowed us to survey the debris, giving us access to their technology. You know, things like jump drives, dark matter tech, and some other fun stuff. There was one small problem though. Our research sucked. Like, really sucked. I had spent so much time conquering the galaxy, I hadn't really focused on things like research and building a proper economy. With it being 2354, we were only 50-ish years away from the endgame crisis. So yeah, it was time for some aggressive investment into our research, because my dumbass had put the crisis strength on 10 times. So to wrap up this war with the Fallen Empire, I took a status quo and created a new subject. With our new subject, I of course built pirate stations and tribute vaults everywhere, which I'd like to point out, yeah, they still kind of sucked. I don't think you could make a proper playthrough of just using pirate stations, but they're great for just skimming a little bit more off the top from your subjects, especially when you combined it with the tribute vaults, which were skimming off like another 10% of their resources. Anyway, we got to work replacing all the foundries with research centers. Building all these labs was great, but we still had the problem of not having enough people to staff them. Plus, I had built a couple of research arcs which also needed filling. So it was back to kidnapping people, however this time instead of enslaving them, I was going to make them residents, and to sweeten the deal, I gave them all social welfare. Yep, that's right fellas, I was literally kidnapping people and funding their education to become a scientist. One small problem we had was the amount of exotic gases we needed for all our research centers, a problem which I solved by building another arc, slapping on a planetary reprocessor, and honestly sucking entire systems dry. Like, I'm not even kidding. This is busted. And I could have made this even more OP if I had picked Mastery of Nature up, which would have harvested an additional 50% resources. Plus, we could, quote, process a planet, which will give us even more resources. However, we can only do this once every 1800 days, but we could still strip mine planets for a lot of resources, so I'm not going to complain. With all the additional pop, I was able to push our tech over the 1K mark, and progress was starting to be made. To also help speed things up, I invaded another fallen empire so we could analyze their debris. It was then something terrible happened. The Blorg woke up. The Blorg being the third and strongest fallen empire who at this point I had just kind of ignored. Them waking up was really bad because now they're looking outwards with ambitions to conquer the galaxy. You might be thinking it's okay, I have a lot of numbers on screen. However, they had much bigger numbers. To make a bad situation worse, another then woke up, which ended up being the fallen empire I had vassalized a little while ago. They also pumped out a ton of fleets, and before I knew it, these two giants had declared war on each other, splitting the galaxy into 4. You had the Blorg, who were backed by the remnants of the galactic community, the Saviks, who were all by themselves and still my vassal for some reason, the Chosen, and then me. Being severely outgunned by both the fallen empires, I tried to tip the scale in our favor by picking Galactic Contender as our next Ascension perk, which will give us some bonus damage against them. Believe it or not, it didn't take too long for the Blorg to smash the other empire, which left me in a very dangerous position. So, I gathered all the fleets and declared war on them in hopes to catch out a couple of theirs. As they approached, I caught a couple of their fleets and took our first victory. In fact, we wrecked them so hard, they immediately fired a peace deal my way. Yeah, I don't think so, buddy. I'm gonna... Wait, what's this? Galactic power surge? A sudden subspace power surge of massive proportions coming from somewhere within the galaxy, and our scientists are struggling to come up with an explanation? That doesn't sound good. Yeah, that really doesn't look good. Turns out these extra-dimensional beings have arrived in our galaxy with the intention of consuming all life. Investigating, we saw they had a 6.9 million fleet, alongside a handful of others, which, you know, just around 1 million as well. This was bad. Actually, this was working out quite well for us because the Unbidden were actively destroying the Blorg's planets. So I took this opportunity to attack the Unbidden myself, taking our first victory against them. However, out of nowhere, suddenly a 1 mil stack appeared, and all of a sudden, I didn't have a fleet anymore. The good news is though, our Marauders are going to continue feeding us a steady flow of fresh ships. The bad news, however, is that they suck. Or at least they suck compared to the Unbidden. But I'm not going to waste them since, you know, they're free, so I waited for our naval cap to be full, and then threw them into the meat grinder while I built a proper fleet back at the base. Something that wasn't going to take too long, because I could build like 10 battleships at a time thanks to our capital shipyard. I sent a couple more waves to their deaths until the Unbidden got dangerously close to our Marauders. Our boys have been doing a okay-ish job at weakening them, so I didn't exactly want to lose them. Plus, it was a good opportunity to see if my battleships were any good. Once I had assembled the masses, I took the fight to them where we took some real heavy losses. Like, I'm talking nearly 3,000 in fleet cap just wiped off against a single one of their fleets. Bear in mind, they had like 11 just in this corner. Also, I'd love to just point out that even though I'm actively defending against the dimensional horrors that are feasting upon millions of people, the galactic community decides to declare me as a crisis. Again, brilliant. Good job, fellas. Congrats on being the most useless establishment ever created. Anyway, once our fleets had recovered, I attacked another one of theirs. However, this time things started going very wrong for us when their main armada arrived. Plus, I think they had enough of our bullshit as they destroyed my Marauders. Which triggered another event which made me the Great Khan again. With the Reavers being replaced with the Lysian Horde, they just started giving me free ships as well. So it was time to build another armada, but this time, I also started the construction of a backup plan. Once the armada was built, I headed towards one of their fleets where we lost again. Yeah, I think we have to admit we can't do this. The Unbidden were just too strong, and we were too far behind on tech to compete with them. And it's not like I was having any help from the rest of the galaxy either, as they were actively crippling me in the war by destroying all of my way stations. So you know what? Screw these guys. It's time for the backup plan. That being a catapult, which I used to shoot myself into the Chosen's home. The Chosen weren't actually at war with us, so we could just set up shop within their borders and chill. Furthermore, there's also this little system here we can jump to, which I think lore-wise is the Chosen's home. This is where we're going to hide and let the galaxy solve the issue all by themselves and just pray that the Unbidden never find us. That is at least where I left it the previous night. The following morning, I decided I wasn't going to be a coward and actually try and win this. I mean, we still had an incredibly strong economy thanks to all of our subjects. We just needed to grind out a few more techs. While I was rebuilding our navy, a second Unbidden arrived. Initially, I was terrified when I saw their fleet power, until I read they were actually hostile to the original Unbidden. Then, shortly after, another one arrived. With 3 Unbidden factions now actively killing each other, I could just hide away and kill whoever was left. However, the original Unbidden just used their 6.5 mil fleet to kill both of them before they could even get the ball rolling. But this did give me an idea. To defeat the Unbidden, all we had to do was close this portal. Something which would have been a little easier if we didn't let them consume a huge chunk of the galaxy. And that's because they have been building these anchors all over the place, which we'll have to destroy before we can attack the portal. So, here's the plan, fellas. Build a fast hit squad of battleships which were strong enough to take down both the anchors and deal with any fleets that weren't their main stack. Once we were ready, I jumped back into the Chosen systems and used their wormhole to enter the galaxy and got to work racing around the maps destroying the anchors, while I actively avoided their doom stack. One by one they fell, and after a little bit of whack-a-mole as they built more, I raced to destroy the last one next to the portal, jumped into the system, and destroyed it. With the portal destroyed, the end of their invasion was in sight as they were no longer able to call reinforcements. All we had to do was clear up the remaining fleets and we'd be victorious. Which, yeah, wasn't too difficult, it just involved me building a lot of battleships and then finding and killing their big fleet. Also, we had to run around and kill the rest of their stations, but I was too lazy to do that. So we're going to end it here. As always, I want to say thank you for watching, thank you to the people who throw money at me, and thanks again to Paradox for sponsoring this video. And as always, new videos maybe a little more often?